They say there are 3 things you don't talk about in polite company.
And we just made a podcast about all of them.
Politics, religion, sex, and a few other things that'll get you uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner.
So grab a drink, loosen your belt, maybe hide this one from your boss.
Welcome to the Unmentionables. Hey everyone, I'm Evan, the guy with way too many questions and just enough nerve to ask them.
And I'm Melissa, therapist, mom, and here to answer those questions before the arguments start.
So here's how it works. I bring the curiosity, the wait, why is that a thing energy, and Melissa keeps us from setting the whole conversation on fire.
Most of the time.
And we're back for another fun discussion. Remember to follow us on social media. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Unmentionables Podcast, X at UnmentionablesX. And thank you so much for your support and for tuning in. Melissa.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
And it's the scariest time of the year.
It's back to school time.
Yay! If you are anything like me, you are so excited to have the kids back in school, back in routine and schedule, back to a breath of fresh air, and back to the stress of the schedule and the routines and the school demands and the sports.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There always is whenever we go back to school. There's a lot for parents. There's a lot for the kids. There's just an awful lot that all happens at once. And I think it creates a swirling environment of fun and a swirling environment of fear.
Chaos.
Lots of different things going on. And I think we'd really like to navigate some of these ups and downs, the anxieties and excitements of the back to school time, the back to school ritual, I say, because it's always sort of similar every year, right? Get me out to get clothes. I need a new book bag. It's time for new shoes, and let's talk about the realities of that. Talk about some of the things that we experience. Let's talk about some of the things that we know other people are experiencing. And then maybe circle back to some practical steps that we can take to ensure success for us and for our kids.
Sounds good.
So let's talk first about parents, right? As parents, we know there are an awful lot of good things and an awful lot of scary things that are going on at this time of the year. For me, I know I'm excited. The grocery bills are going down. Teen parents, you know what I'm talking about. If you have teenagers.
Well, the board eating,
Yes.
right? It's I'm hungry. And then an hour later, but I'm still hungry again.
Yeah.
Going through 8 loaves of bread in a week.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How many different ways can I make eggs in a day?
Right? Which is awesome when you have your own chickens.
Right.
But
Yes. Well, not everybody has our pros. Houses stay cleaner because there's nobody there.
Right.
To mess them up constantly and then not pick up after themselves, right?
Oh,
For those parents out there that have young kids and maybe they're single parents or maybe both parents are working and they're not at home, daycare expenses go down because you don't have to pay for full day daycare anymore. You've got school.
Absolutely.
That's taking big brunt of that, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of good, wonderful, amazing things that parents we see and we get excited about. They're going to be at school. They're going to be learning. They're going to be doing new things. They're going to be hanging out with their friends. They're going to get some of that energy out at recess.
But to get there, we have to survive. We need to survive the behaviors that come before they're back in school, the behaviors through the first week or 2 of school, especially when they get home after school and they're exhausted because they've been doing more things. And when they're exhausted, they're cranky and they're irritable and just navigating getting up earlier again. But this is often when we see an increase in siblings being nasty to each other. The whininess, the poking and the prodding and the defiance. We see a lot of those things right now.
Yeah, so parents are dealing with that. And I think a lot of parents are probably going, why is this a problem every single year around this time? I don't think for most parents, right out of the box anyway, they really fully understand. Can you talk a little bit about what generally causes those kinds of actions and responses? What are the kids feeling that's really causing that? And how can parents recognize it?
So I think it's really important for us as parents to know that every behavior has a cause. There's a reason underneath it, because we have good kids that struggle. And it's not just a struggle when there's negative stressors happening. Exciting things are stress too. And our body's nervous system responds to that in the fight or flight response. So when we are extremely excited about a new teacher and seeing our friends again, kids have a hard time regulating. They rely on us as parents to help them co-regulate. So if we're going to do that, we need to stay calm in the face of whatever they're bringing at us. And instead of reacting to the behavior on the surface, parents can take that step back and say, okay, my kid is under a level of stress right now, even over something exciting. And it's my job to step back and help them navigate that. Let's talk about feelings. We grew up in a generation where feelings weren't okay. Yeah. We stuffed our feelings. And if we had big feelings, we were sent away to our room or punished for them. And it's instinctual for us as parents to respond in that same way unless we recognize it and do better.
Yeah, absolutely. Know better, do better.
Know better, do better. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit too about, as parents, some of the fears that we have, right? Because while there's a lot of wonderful, there's a lot of fears that we have.
Sure.
That go along with the kids going back to school. Mm-hmm. We talk about the safety of the children.
Yes.
We are entrusting our babies, our children, to other people who we have varying levels of understanding of.
Absolutely. And, while there are a lot of people, the vast majority of people that work in schools, right? And I experience this in our home district. They love our kids. They truly care about the physical and emotional well-being of our kids. And, we regularly hear in the news about that teacher who had sex with a student or was accused of touching a student, whether it was proven or not. And I know for me as a parent, that gives me concern and reason to pause and look at a district and what the district's priorities are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up. There's been so many things in the news lately, like you said, locally as well as nationally, just recently within the last, few months, about, even years, about, teachers and staff being inappropriate with students in different ways, or accused of being inappropriate with students in different ways. And, there's multiple levels of thought that go into this, right? Whenever something like this happens, it's big online. It hits the social media pages, the Facebook groups, and you start to see messages like, this teacher's been weird for 30 plus years,
right?
Or, even the flip side of that, this accusation is just an accusation. Let's see how the facts play out, which I think is kind of more of a reasonable take. Okay, let's talk about what the realities are of this situation. But then you've got the full flip side of that, which is you can't trust what these kids say. They just don't like this teacher because they failed them or whatever it might be.
Right.
And I think there's so much speculation that goes on those online communities. It can be, really difficult to sort out the facts and the truth. And depending on how the districts handle things and depending on how the people respond to certain things, it can go different ways. You've got situations where districts, you've had a teacher who's had a long history, decades-long history of accusations that, where there's smoke, there's generally fire of some kind.
I was going to say, when there's that much smoke, there's a fire. And those are the most dangerous ones. Because when we look at the profile of a predator, we look at somebody where they know the lines. They know the legal definitions. They know how to skirt right up to the edge of a boundary, but not cross it. So if someone does say something, they know nothing can be proven and nothing that they did actually crosses into the line of getting them in trouble.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And you've got these teachers unions that are protecting these. And I stop short of saying that the unions are actively protecting predators, even though I feel like their actions on behalf of their quote unquote members tend to protect the bad actors more so than, the good teachers caught in a misfortune. And there have been that. I mean, out of Forsyth County, North Carolina, there is a teacher that has now filed a lawsuit against the Forsyth County sheriff and several investigative officers after allegations of a sex crime from a student were proven incorrect. And it seemed to, at least to this former teacher and his attorney, that the investigators just wanted to find him guilty, right? Because a student said it must be, a fact. And actually turns out that the kid, the individual student, not only was lying, mentally ill.
Wow.
And had several instances where they bragged about, hurting that teacher for a variety of different reasons.
Right. And, I think that's why you have to look at every one of these cases through a separate lens. Looking at the fact that kids do have access to more information through the internet and social media. And I mean, I can tell you, having been Child Protective Services child abuse investigator, that we know when kids have been coached.
Sure.
We know when things don't add up. When well trained, I should say, us police can see through the smoke and typically discern, which again is very different than something meeting the definition of child abuse or meeting a threshold to press criminal charges.
Sure, absolutely. And again, to go back to sort of the handling of these situations, right? A lot of the public sentiment is about how the district handles these things. When you have a situation where you have someone who has a long history of these kinds of accusations and nothing has ever been done, the public becomes skeptical of that school district. And so whatever that school district comes to as an answer to whatever the most recent complaint is, it's likely that the public is going to turn on that district and there's going to be some kind of a backlash, right? Because again, like you said, where there's smoke of that kind, there's generally fire.
Well, and think about all the options that a district would have. They can relocate a teacher. Because I think we have to recognize, especially with teachers' unions, that they can't just fire someone over allegations. And I will also say, within the profile of one of these predators, they will want to stay and they will want to remain.
Well, that's where their target-rich environment is that they've groomed, right?
They'll remain in the same environment. They won't want to move to a different school within the district. They won't want to move to a different position within the district because if the allegations follow them, it gives validity to it. But these people recognize that if they stay where they are, well, now they've been shown to be innocent. So they can continue. It actually emboldens them to continue their behaviors, because as more allegations are made, and even that's, I'm skeptical, because people even now more so won't want to report because somebody else reported and look what happened, nothing. So what's the point?
Right.
And
agreed. I mean, that's been a societal question around sexual abuse for going back as far as I can imagine.
Sure.
That it's been a crime, right?
It's a crime that's so hard to prove.
Right.
Because it's less than 5% of cases. If there is any kind of transfer of DNA or forensic evidence, less than 5% of cases that are seen within 24 hours actually have forensic evidence.
Right.
So when you're talking about things like groping, being up close on somebody, you're talking about things where there isn't necessarily DNA transfer or any kind of penetration either. What we're looking at is he said, she said.
Yeah.
And our society, and it's been shown over and over again, doesn't care to listen to our children.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, again, and there's smoke and there's fire, and there's times where it's true and there's times where it's not. And a lot of it goes back to how the district handles the situation, how transparent the situation is. Again, I go back to the unions on this. It makes it difficult when the unions want to keep everything hush, hidden, and force the districts into those kinds of situations. There was another story out of Virginia. This was actually a Christian school where a teacher there was accused of committing sex crimes, and that school handled it differently.
I think this is actually amazing. That was out of Virginia, right?
Yes.
And this school found out that a female teacher was having sex with a male high school student, and they themselves reported it to police within an hour, they're saying, of finding out. And what's interesting to me about this is a school representative named Jones told WSET-TV, she said, "We chose integrity instead of it being swept under the rug." She goes on to say, "Scripture is very clear that if it was done in the dark, it was going to be brought to light." And this, I get, what's it called when your skin like
Tingly?
Yeah, tingly. I get all tingly when I read this, because this is what we were talking about last week, accountability. And this school knew, especially as a Christian school, and I read a bunch of the comments, and it was, of course, it happened in a Christian school. Other ones were, why are you proud of yourself for reporting? You have to report. And I think about this and I go, well, how many districts don't report their own teacher? How many sweep it under the rug and the teacher goes and finds another job? How many times does this happen in public schools? Why wouldn't it happen in a Christian school? And at least this school and these people are standing by what they believe. They reported it, they're dealing with it, and they knew they'd be condemned, backlash, repercussions. And they said, we're going to stand in the light anyway. And we know this is wrong. Yeah. We're going to actually do something about it. That's a school that I would send my kid to, because they care more about my students' safety and well-being than their own reputation. And I think that we're seeing a great lack of that in the public school system today.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be scary to send your kids into those kinds of environments. And so we've talked a lot about teachers and the safety aspect there. Let's switch gears a little bit to school violence. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know, especially as the kids get older, it's not, I think, as bad for elementary school kids or even, early middle school years. But as they get a little bit older, as the hormones start to kick in, as social dynamics amongst the kids change and they become, less focused on, working together in playtime and, maybe more focused on their position within their social ranks, it builds animosity and things like fights and, weapons in schools and those kinds of things come into play. And I know that is a fear that a lot of parents have.
Sure. And I know we usually do see this more up at the high school level, especially with fights breaking out, that kind of stuff. And I would just encourage parents that it comes back to what you're teaching your kids, what you're modeling for your kids. Are you modeling conflict resolution? Are you telling them, well, if somebody hurts you, go punch them in the face? Are you teaching them that violence is how you handle things? Or are we teaching our kids, if you have an out, take the out. Don't look for the fight.
Right.
And quite honestly, these days, a lot of parents are bullies. And they're raising bullies.
Right.
And we look at it wanting to change the world, wanting to have a kind place where we just accept each other. And we don't all have to be the same. We don't have to believe the same things. We can have our own strengths and weaknesses and allow other people to be who they are and just be nice. What happened to kindness?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, something that I was thinking a little bit about. And so I looked into some of the statistics around, violence, school violence and victimization and those kinds of things. And unsurprisingly to, I think, most people, the heavier violence trends in terms of, more school violence tend to be in populated areas, cities, for example, city, centers and all of those kinds of things where you have, a mass of people. I think you have lots of different dynamics when it comes to, how people are raised in those situations. I mean, look, just candidly, and again, that's what this show is all about.
It sure is.
The cities are rougher places. The cities are, places where I think people are tired of other people being on top of them all the time, where everybody has an opinion.
It's a lower socioeconomic status. You have parents working outside the home. You have multi-generational living situations.
Tons of single-parent dynamics.
Tons. You've got
gang associations.
Higher rates of drug activity. You have all of these underlying issues that lead to more conflict.
Yeah, and that spills over into the schools, and you have those kinds of situations that happen there. And then as you get, but what was interesting to me, if you look at it, is as you spiral out from a city and you go into the suburban areas where, again, it's more densely packed than your rural communities, but that socioeconomic
it broadens.
Situation changes, right? You have, people who are making more money. Right. You have people who have a little bit more space between them and their neighbors. And you generally sort of start to see that trend of violence lessen. The further and further you get out from the city, you see that trend lessen. Now, what I will say is that you find in places where they've done some integration. So Delaware is an example. I used to live in Delaware. From there. There were districts around the city of Wilmington, for example, that the state of Delaware and the city of Wilmington had decided to bus students from the city out to the suburbs to go to schools out there, as opposed to putting schools or keeping schools inside the city.
Oh, interesting.
And we found that those suburban areas near Wilmington, where the students were getting bussed in from the city, were seeing more rates of violence than schools that were further out from the city, and we're getting less of those students bussed out to them.
Well, it's a mentality, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of conducting oneself that's learned behavior.
Yeah.
It is truly survival at a young age, and it's intergenerational.
Yeah. And then as you get out into the urban or the rural areas, away from the urban centers and out to the rural areas, you see a lot less violence and, believe it or not, a lot less bullying.
Yes.
Now, I know a lot, that may come as a surprise to a lot of people because they think those hicks, those hillbillies, they don't accept people that are different from them. And I think we live in a very rural community.
We sure do.
We have a very rural school district. I mean, this is the kind of place where we don't need to outsource our agricultural technology studies. They could go across the street.
Oh, honey, kids come to school riding on a tractor.
Right.
We've had cows in the high school as senior pranks. Like,
right. So, this is a rural community that we live in, and even in our own family, we have kids that
diversity,
are neurodivergent. We have kids that color their hair in wildly amazing ways that are cool and fun.
Sure.
But you might think in a place like this that they would get bullied or picked on, and you just don't see it as much. Sometimes you do, but it's not as much.
I think we have to rely on those around us more down here because we are further apart.
Yeah.
And my experience is that it breeds a stronger community of if you need help with something, you ask around and somebody's got extra of something, or even if that's extra time, that they're willing to come and lend a hand. They're willing to lend resources. They're willing to lend both physical resources and labor resources. Sure. It really is. Now, we also live among the Amish, and even there, you see people helping people, caring about people. We walk into Tractor Supply, and everybody's talking to everybody about everything.
Absolutely. It was one of the biggest changes for me coming from Delaware, which is much more aligned with sort of the city lifestyle of, put your head down and walk, live and let live. I'm not going to, not associate, but I'm not going to go out of my way to have a conversation with you because it's none of my business. Whatever you're doing here is none of my business. But in the rural communities, people, you're right, they do care. You can put a post on Facebook about needing some stone, and within an hour, you'll have somebody that's like, come get the stone out of my backyard because I need to get rid of it anyway so I can plant there. Or,
right.
Whatever it might be.
And I think even like when we speak about the teachers and the vast majority of the staff at the district, it's not every day that principals are getting duct taped to walls as a reward to the students for whatever it was.
Yes, this was deliberate. This was not, they wasn't done.
Or the principal who's chasing a goat down the road and it makes its way onto Facebook. But even with that, it's not every day that you have a middle school principal, and I deeply respect this, who in morning announcement says, hey, just in case you haven't heard this yet today, just know you're loved. A group of principals that actually goes and still plays Foursquare with the kids at recess, because we still have recess time in middle school, and shoots that basketball and high fives the kids and actually is genuinely getting to know them.
Absolutely. Moral of that story is you can high five the kids, but don't pat their butts.
Don't touch their butts. And, I want to pause on that too, because what do we do as parents when our kid comes home and says, hey, this teacher put their hand on me? And I know I try to avoid conflict and try to get a feel for it. And where is that line? I'm a huge proponent of kids having a voice and using it respectfully, recognizing that kids have choices and that they have autonomy over their body. And I think there's a big difference between a female student finding a female teacher and saying, I'm having a really rough day. Can I have a hug? It's also different in elementary school than it is in middle school or high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think under no circumstances should a male be putting a hand on a female student, nor should a female teacher be putting a hand on a male student. Now, there's going to be a lot of other opinions on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on the relationship that a teacher has with a student.
Yeah, I mean, we know principals and, assistant principals that, will walk up and give a side hug to a kid
Absolutely.
that looks like they're, struggling.
Totally appropriate.
Whatever. And I think those are situations where, again, as parents, we have to be discerning. We have to understand, what we're dealing with in the situations. And we have to trust our guts. We know when something seems off and when something
But our
seems
kids do
innocuous.
too. And think about that for a second, because if your kid comes to you and says, this teacher's creepy, and he cupped my shoulder and rested his forearm on my back and leaned on me, and I was really uncomfortable, that's vastly different than, hey, I was real upset at school today and I started to cry and I went down to this teacher's room and asked, for a hug. And that teacher, gave me a hug and sat with me and we talked. Mm-hmm. Those are two extremely different scenarios
Wildly
that we're talking
different.
about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then as parents, again, so there's the safety aspect, there's teachers, there's other students, school violence. There's also the mental safety aspect when we talk about bullying. This is something that has always existed, I think, to a certain extent, right? Again, we kind of mentioned this earlier. There's always some level of social dynamic where the kid that's a little different.
That's life. That's even
right?
as adults.
The person that's a little bit different gets ostracized to a certain degree, a certain level. And I'm not suggesting that that's right. I'm not suggesting that that is what we aspire to, as a people. But it is reality, and I think it is something that we have to recognize and understand exists. And I think that schools have done a pretty good job of looking at the social, inner dynamics of the kids at all age levels, especially early in life. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of the trends that we're seeing where bullying is kind of reducing. Now, if you look at the trends right now, if you were to go and chat GPT this or Google it, you're going to see that there's a reduction, quote unquote, in these bullying and victimization statistics, and it's going to look fairly significant. The problem that I have with those studies at this point is they're typically done over the COVID period where nobody was in school.
Right.
And so it's a little bit of I have a little bit of a healthy skepticism on that. I want to see what the latest numbers are now that the kids are generally, back in physical school.
Sure.
But we do see a big reduction. I think a lot of what we do as parents is think about things the way they were when we were younger.
Sure.
And apply that to today without maybe really understanding.
Right.
I think maybe you can talk a little bit about your perspective on this, because I know that you are really engaged with the kids, with their teachers, and you kind of understand the realities of today versus what we experienced.
Sure. Even when we talk about bullying, I think some of the bigger issues right now really are in elementary school and middle school. And it has to do with child development and impulsivity. It has to do with insecurity. Kids who are insecure with themselves, we know, trend toward bullying. And also, kids who are insecure tend to look at groups of people who may not be bullying, but just be afraid to enter that group because it's intimidating. Mm-hmm. And I think that working with these kids, encouraging them to just try to be friends with everybody. And if there's somebody you don't get along with, you can just choose to not spend time with them. That's okay. Go find a different friend. But a lot of this stuff that we're seeing really is it's developmental. We're seeing a lot of social delays still from COVID. The younger kids, well, let's see, going into even kids going into 4th grade right now, we're not in the public school setting yet when COVID happened. And we're seeing fears of social environments, fears of the world. All of that comes from what they were born into and what they lived through in their very early years. And for people who chose to mask, they didn't learn how to read social expression. They didn't learn those basic cues. And I think after we stopped masking, I don't think anybody really thought about, wow, these kids are going to be really delayed in that.
That's a really, really important point that I think has gone underrepresented in the discussions, during COVID and since COVID, in terms of the ability for our kids, to really progress socially. Mm-hmm. That, just being away from everybody and online on a computer is one thing, right? There's still video, there's still the ability to sort of see faces and stuff like that. It's maybe more limited. And the interactions in person versus, on a computer are always different, right?
Right.
But I also think 100% when kids are young and they're developing and they're learning social cues and all of those things, it's really, an underrated importance to be able to see facial expressions and full body language and all of those things that these kids were deprived of during their formative school years, kindergarten through, 2nd, 3rd grade,
right,
while we were in that COVID situation. And I think it's a great point to call out that maybe as parents, we need to be a lot more understanding about our young kids and where they are developmentally.
Well, and we need to get them off devices and back to team sports, back to outside interaction and activities and actually interacting in social environments.
Yeah. Yeah. And as parents, another thing that we're concerned about or scary for us is academic success. How can I prepare the kids, for success academically? How can we, get them to a place where they are ready for the year? Can you just talk a little bit about, with all of the anxieties and all of the things that the kids are going through right now and all that they're feeling, how do we prepare them mentally for what's coming?
I was going to say, I don't know if anybody is going to like my response to that because I don't agree with teaching to tests. I think that we've done our kids a really huge disservice. And I'm not worried about my kid being ready for the year. I know as a kid, and I'm the youngest of 3, and I always say I was the dumb one in the family, right? And the reality of that is that it's true in a very real sense because out of the 3 of us, I had the lowest IQ. Still smart, but compared to them, I wasn't. And what came easily to them didn't come easily to me. I had to figure out how to work for things. And so I remember going into every single school year truly and honestly believing I was going to fail. I'm not going to know this stuff. I'm not going to be able to learn it. It's going to be too hard. And I remember my mom saying to me before every school year, Melissa, just remember, they start with a review. They start with the stuff you already learned. I see that now as an adult looking back, but our kids don't see that. And especially when our kids have areas of weakness, which they all do. It's fears of, will I fail? Will I be able to keep up? if they've had a hard time in classes before, if they've had a hard time keeping up with classes. This is where, as parents, you're their best advocate. If they're struggling, let's not settle for the school saying they just need to work harder.
Yeah.
Let's go in. Let's look at things like 504 plans. Let's look at IEPs. Let's look at, are we demanding too much of our children? You know, I'm a parent that doesn't believe in homework. I don't take my work home with me at the end of my workday.
Right.
And if we're going to say that school is their work, A, they don't get paid for it, but they sure as heck don't get paid to bring it home.
Yeah.
Home, that's my time with my kid.
Yeah.
Don't you dare invade on my time.
Yeah. And parents, I think if you're listening to this and you're a parent, understand that you have parental rights. Understand that these are your children. And just because you send them to a school to learn things doesn't mean you just have to accept what the school suggests.
Absolutely.
Right? There are avenues for students who need more help. There are 504 plans. There are IEPs. There are just discussions with good teachers to say, here's how Johnny learns.
Right.
And
a lot of teachers are willing.
Most teachers are willing to because they want the kids to be successful.
Right.
Even if they are bound to a test for their, performance, right? If little Johnny learns better in this way, then little Johnny's going to do better on the test.
Somebody can read the test to little Johnny.
Right.
And for the parents who already have 504s and IEPs, my favorite thing is when I get contacted by a teacher to say my kid, isn't doing this, that, or the other thing. And I say, well, have you followed the guidelines in their IEP?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to remind them that that thing exists and they have to do those things.
They give me a blank look because what they're tattling on my kid for is already described in the IEP as an accommodation.
Right. Right. And also, I think it's valuable for parents to recognize that you have a right, and your kids have a right to a certain extent.
They sure do.
To ask for changes to that 504 or that IEP throughout the year as time comes up, as things come up. You don't necessarily have to wait until the IEP meeting.
You don't have to. You can call a meeting anytime there's a problem. And they are required to convene the whole group unless they're willing to modify it right then.
Right.
So if they're willing to modify and move forward with the change, a meeting doesn't have to happen. But if they argue it, well, we'll convene a whole meeting, and that's everybody's time.
Yeah.
Let's bring everybody together and have a conversation. Oftentimes, the district already knows that what they're doing isn't correct. And, a lot of parents just aren't educated in this. I mean, I can tell you, my kids all have a copy of their IEP or 504 in their possession.
Yeah.
So, if it's part of that 504 that a teacher needs to give them advanced warning for the section that they're going to need to read to the class so they can pre-read it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the teacher randomly calls on them. My kid can say, hey, you didn't let me know in advance, so I'm going to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And they have that document right there.
Yeah, yeah. And these are tools that you have for your kids for a reason. These are tools your kids have for a reason. You're allowed and you're encouraged to use them. So
absolutely.
As parents, we need to be more empowered.
And empower our kids.
And empower our kids. Absolutely.
Our kids are allowed to have a voice. They are allowed to speak up. And that's it. If your kid is coming home and saying, this happened, find out more. If your kid comes home and says, this made me uncomfortable, ask and find out more. Let's stop sweeping stuff under the rug.
Absolutely.
And let's stand in the light and have conversations. Let's have open dialogue.
Absolutely. Speaking of conversations and open dialogue, I know that we have a special guest with us.
We do. M2 is one of the clinicians here at the practice. And, I thought that she just might have some really awesome input on this.
Yeah. M2 is also a Melissa. And
She
so
is.
because we have two Melissas, the owner gets top billing. She's M1. And then
Well, did you ever hear where that came from?
No.
We do a theme for Halloween every year. Our whole building gets together and we have a big Halloween party, and we always do a theme as an office. And so we were Dr. Seuss the one year. And instead of being thing 1 and thing 2, we were M1 and M2.
Oh, that's great. So we're going to bring M2 into the conversation.
So, Melissa, we were just having this conversation out in the lobby and talking about different school stressors and how we're navigating that for our kids and stuff. And I thought it was really cool when you were telling me about some of the things that you've already done.
Yeah.
And we're doing. So, my hope was that you could just share with people what are some of the stresses and anxieties that you've had as a parent.
Yeah. So, yeah, just to even like paint the picture, like both my kids are my daughter is entering 7th grade. My son is entering 5th grade. So also his last year of elementary school. So that's like playing into it. Definitely, like they're both neurodivergent. My daughter has had to deal with a lot of kind of like bullying last year. So that was playing into some of the anxieties, like for me wanting to protect her going into the school year. And then I think for my son, he's kind of been able to scoot past. He's very charismatic. So he's been able to scoot past some of the the bullying, but there's still that fear. Like he's entering 5th grade. Kids are going to start to notice he's a little bit different. But yeah, so I don't know. I think leading up to it, we were having a lot of talks about like things that they're looking forward to. And so they were starting school
This past week,
yeah,
right?
this past week. Yeah. So the day before I took the day off, we went like downtown Lancaster doing some shopping. We went to Pottery Works so then we could like calm ourselves down. Like, so then we weren't thinking constantly about the looming like dread of school the next day. And then we talked about like the things like particularly for them, what like their fears were, and then also like their like intention for the year or like their goal, or if they could like sum up the year, like what they want to focus on in one word, and more from like the focus of like, you know, them as people. Because I feel like for them particularly, I'm like, you know what, I think academic, we're fine.
Sure.
Like we're going to get, you're also like 7th grade and elementary school, but like more just their own like personal development. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about maybe what they came up with?
Yeah. So they were focusing on, I think for my daughter, like a lot just like working on being like boldly herself. And I think she even like her word was kind of like courage. But so my son like was thinking about like self-confidence for her and found they both like picked out like a stone that kind of like symbolized like what they were focusing on. So the one that like was for my daughter was like self-confidence. My son, terrible, but I don't remember what his but yeah, and then they each picked like a little token that had like an animal on it that like would, you know, kind of be like their thing to calm them, and then put them in like a little like satchel, and then we tucked them in their backpack. So then there was like a focus of like, okay, this is what we're doing for the year. This is what's going to carry us through. And
I love that.
yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me about the sage?
Yeah. So then, and then I like got like burnt some sage and was like, I had them put on the backpack and just kind of like moved around them. And of course for them, they were like, you know what, Mom, okay, whatever. This is what we're doing. But I think like we've worked a lot on just like being able to express like, you know, for me, I know that I was really anxious, and for them to be able to say like, got this, like, I don't, like, you're feeling anxious. I'm feeling a little bit anxious, but like you can keep your anxiety on your side.
Don't add to it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna burn some sage, and we're just gonna like.
If this helps you, we'll do it.
So yeah, it was for you. Yeah, well, I think for both, because it was like, yeah, and I think for them it was just more of like that intentional, like, oh, we're taking time, we're acknowledging like we're feeling anxious, and that we can bring that anxiety too. Like they can come and talk to me.
You validated it.
Yeah.
You said, this makes sense. Let's feel it. And I'm going to sit here with you, which is beautiful.
Yeah. And just a very...
Do you have any other thoughts or suggestions on, other than just being intentional about recognizing it and talking through it, and even the act of pottery and how that uses our hands and it's calming in that way? Do you have any other tips or thoughts about how other parents might be able to recognize anxiety in themselves or their kids, self-care, what to do with it?
Right. Well, I think like one other thing that I was thinking with like for my daughter, I like wrote out her schedule in a way that because the schedule they gave her was like overwhelming with information. And she had said like, it doesn't make sense. So then we talked about like, okay, what do you actually need, and separate it out in a way that made sense for her. So that was super helpful. But yeah, I think like the other thing is just kind of like first ask them like, how are you about school, before like me just throwing on like,
instead of assuming.
This feels really anxious.
Yeah,
Like,
I struggle with that so much because like when I was in school, I had a difficult time. Like, my last name, I get picked on all the time. Like, right? It's wild. The name Quaich. I learned what a queef was when I was 8. So it was kind of wild. But I project that at times onto the kids, and I sort of catch myself. And I'm sure there are other parents out there that are doing that. So I think that's, great to sort of take a step back and ask them first, like, okay, what are your concerns, if any? What are you thinking about? Are you anxious? Are you excited? And or both, because you can have two sides of that coin. Sure.
Yeah. They can exist at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even like, I don't know, I know like a big thing just even the past year that's been helpful is like telling, like particularly for my daughter, telling her like when she goes to see her own therapist, I will say like, I've said tons of times, like, you can drag me through the dirt if that's going to help you to work through your stuff. Like, because I think she was very, like protective of like not wanting to say things bad about us, about like her friends, like, and so, like realizing that you can like have this thing that you don't like and also really care about the person is really big message that we've been trying to work on. And so even with school, that like, you can have those different feelings, and that she can like, she'll tell me tons of times like, Mom, I hear like you're feeling anxious. You keep your anxiety over on that side of the car or wherever we are.
She's the daughter of a therapist.
Right. And that's, I think just like letting them know, like, they can feel, I can feel like
bleeding over.
And I think also like recognize that like I needed that day and to just like do something, not just like focus on, of course in my head I organize like their rooms, we should get all these things set up. I think we need to not be thinking about and like, think about like, okay, how are you going to feel, and
organize their brains.
And get them
and their
like,
nervous system.
Give them a minute to rest and sort of prepare, right?
Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing with us. Hoping to see you again.
Thank you.
Well, that was such a fascinating discussion. I think we've learned a lot today about sort of where we are as parents, where our kids are with the back to school time period. We learned a lot about, how we can recognize what's going on, both with us and with our kids. The discussion with M2 was fascinating around sort of how she handles the situation and what she was feeling. And I think poignant discussions with her kids telling her to keep her anxieties to herself. I think that's something that we as parents, tend to do. We tend to over empathize maybe with our kids and drop some of our anxieties in their lap. These kids should be allowed to, have their feelings and share those feelings. We want to encourage them to think about the positives, right? Reconnecting with friends and, seeing their teachers that they form bonds with and all the cool activities that they're going to face. And while recognizing that they have anxieties, like, will I fit in? This school's so big, and what if I get lost?
Right.
You know, what if I don't do well academically? And, you know, we've talked about recognizing those things and how those fears are real. And maybe, Melissa, you can recap, you know, how do we as parents work with our kids and allay our own fears as well as theirs?
Sure. I think you really hit the nail on the head. We want to validate. We want to validate that these kids have feelings and that those feelings are very real to them. It doesn't mean we have to agree. It doesn't mean we have to have the same feelings. But recognizing that is how they feel, and that is okay. Just going back to recognizing that behaviors stem from something deeper. And we need to be able to talk with them and have that open dialogue about whatever it is going on. Looking at mitigating fears by planning ahead. You know, hey, if your concern is I can't go to the bathroom during class, then let's see where we can fit those bathroom breaks in for you and plan ahead in that way. I think as a parent, it's important to remember that we are not a pain in the ass. We are our kids' biggest advocate. And I say that because I would address a concern and I would feel guilty because I'm bothering them. And I can't tell you how many administrators have said, look, you are their advocate. We might not like it all the time, but you have to do your job in this.
And just as a caveat there, just to add, you often catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Absolutely.
So take this, you know, with your own grain of salt. But whenever you're dealing with these administrators and these school officials and these teachers, there's a couple things. So one, treat them with respect, and you're going to get respect back, right? Two, recognize that in most cases, I think everybody's on the same side here.
Yes,
right?
for the kids.
There are rare cases where you have an administrator or a teacher that only cares about themselves, and those one-off cases, you have to handle those one-off cases.
Sure.
But most of the time, those teachers, those paraprofessionals, those administrators, they care about your kids. They care about their success. They want to help them. They want to make their own jobs easier too. Don't get me wrong, but
I think one of the biggest things too is come with ideas.
Yeah.
Don't just come to complain.
Yeah.
Don't come because you're upset with that teacher or blaming a teacher for something. Come with ideas and thoughts on how do we make this better?
Yeah. How many times have we heard one story from our kids?
Oh, gosh.
Only to go to the school and find out, oh, wait, this was a different story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think I want to touch briefly too on the kids who are hesitant to go to school. They don't want to. Again, taking a deeper look at that and where is that school refusal coming from? And also, again, just remembering the school wants to work with you. They want your kid in school. Even if that means, and I know there were times where I could get a kid to the school building, but they sat in the nurse's office and did schoolwork all day, or sat in a conference room or guidance, but they were there. And most of these school districts have a vested interest in working with you as the parent, helping work through whatever issues are going on with your child. I think most often we find a lot of supportive people. Everybody has a bad day.
Absolutely.
And, you know, at the school, they have bad days. As parents, we have bad days, and as kids, you know, and that's often why we get 504s in place, is because our kids are dealing with stuff and we need those extra accommodations and just the extra support, not to help our child avoid, but to help them build that tolerance for distress and to build their ability to persevere through hard things and recognize and use the support systems that they have. A lot of it comes back to communication, open communication and dialogue.
Yeah. And I know you've been a big proponent of finding activities at the school that the students or our kids enjoy and will keep them motivated.
Absolutely.
Things like band, orchestra,
Sports.
drama, sports.
I'm also that parent that will listen when my kids talk about school. And I listen not for who they're complaining about, but who is it that they're connecting with. And I'm the parent that'll, behind the scenes, shoot that teacher an email and say, hey, my kid really respects you. My kid really feels supported by you. They're having a tough time. Can you try to just connect with them and see if maybe there's something that maybe you can be a better help than I can? Because let's be honest, our kids need other safe adults because they don't always want to come to their parent with things.
Yeah.
So I encourage that. Well, I encourage my kids to be open and honest about everything at school with their teachers and staff. We encourage that, like M2 said, in therapy too. If you need to complain about me, complain away.
Absolutely.
If it helps you out, go for it.
Absolutely. Well, again, everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Want to remind you that you can get us wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on social. And
just remember that if it feels uncomfortable, if it feels unsafe, if it feels awkward, the answer is no. And as parents, we need to address it.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. Bye.
Thought it'd be golden, crossing the line and don't look back. Think I was broken, I needed some time to clear my head. 'Cause I've made all the mistakes and I've dealt with the heartbreaks, but I think that I found my way. 'Cause I've been sinking like a stone, Carolina, take me home. Nothing's ever really broken, I won't let you go. 'Cause I'm finding my way right back to you. I'll find my way back to you. I see a river floating its way out to the sea. I can remember carving our names onto that tree. And I just wanna see you, 'cause you will never know just how much I've been missing home. 'Cause I've been sinking like a stone, Carolina, take me home. Nothing's ever really broken, I won't let you go. 'Cause I'm finding my way right back to you. Yeah, I'll find my way back to you. I think that I'm finding my way right back to you. Yeah, I think that I'm finding my way. Thought it'd be golden, crossing the line and don't look